I understand that you're about to lose everything you think you own. The clang of Gus's spatula hitting the grill ceased. The wheezing of the coffee machine sputtered out, and the low, hungry murmur of the lunchtime rush at the copper kettle died completely. Every eye, from the grizzled trucker wrestling a sandwich in booth 2 to the trio of retired teachers at the counter, was fixed on me. Eleanor Vance, the 73-year-old waitress, and the target of my declaration, the magnificent, arrogant fool named Sterling Roth in booth 7. He looked up from his scattered financial papers, his expression a perfect, breathtaking mix of high offense and sheer wounded disbelief. His tailored suit, a shade of blue that demanded attention, seemed to bristle with corporate indignation. "I beg your pardon," he said, his words sharp enough to cut glass, dripping with the kind of condescension you develop after years of being told you're the smartest man in the room. I don't recall asking for financial advice from the waitress. I felt the familiar, hot rush of shame, the constant companion of my second life. It felt like the ghost of Eleanor Vance, senior partner at Vance Advisory Group, was weeping right behind me, mocking my stained apron. But I didn't flinch. I had seen the numbers on his desk, and the numbers, unlike my own son, never lied. "You're right," I replied, my voice now low, steady, and entirely professional. The practiced warmth I used for customers was gone. "You didn't ask, but if you had, I'd tell you that those leverage ratios are terminal. Your cash flow structure isn't just unstable. It's a house of cards leaning into a Category 5 hurricane. What I can see from here suggests you're heading for a complete, undignified, and entirely avoidable collapse." He shot up so fast, his chair screeched across the worn vinyl floor. His pale eyes, usually glinting with predatory confidence, were clouded with something genuine and stomach-lurching: panic. That was the hook. That moment, right there, was the precise point where my life, shattered and swept into the corporate dustbin 2 years prior, started its slow, agonizing climb back out of the wreckage. It's the moment that brought Sterling Roth, wet and shaking, clutching a folder of his deepest secrets, to my door at 6 the next morning. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to stay with me. It's a story about integrity found in a lost life and the strange, brutal journey of redemption. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It warms this old heart to know where my words travel. 2 years earlier, I was not the woman smelling of cleanser and stale coffee. I was Eleanor Vance, the queen of the 42nd floor. My office in downtown Chicago, a sanctuary of marble, mahogany, and glass, looked down on the entire financial district. I managed portfolios that easily topped $50 million. My clients were the people who shaped the city skyline, the tech entrepreneurs who changed the way we lived, and generational families who considered my signature on their statements an absolute guarantee of stability. My life was defined by the exhilarating precision of the market and the impeccable geometry of my quarterly reports. My son Marcus was meant to inherit that world. He was bright, effortlessly charming, and dangerously impatient. In my quest to provide him with every opportunity, I shielded him from the grit of the financial world, never teaching him the crucial value of patience, or more accurately, the necessity of legality. The end came, as catastrophes often do, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. I was working late, reviewing the consolidated accounts for a new venture, when the elevator doors hissed open and a tide of dark blue jackets flooded the hallway. FBI. They moved with a cold, silent efficiency that was terrifyingly professional. The papers they slapped onto my desk were seizure notices. They covered everything: my leather blotter, the framed diploma, even the tiny porcelain owl I kept for luck. Marcus, my sweet, reckless boy, had been running a convoluted shell game for nearly 9 months, forging my signature, moving funds like he was dealing cards on a riverboat, all in a deluded attempt to grow the company faster and make Mommy proud. The final figure was horrific: $3.1 million embezzled from 3 major client accounts. The irony was a physical sickness. For 30 years, I had built my reputation on rock-solid integrity, on teaching clients to spot the smallest financial ripple. Yet my own child had been waving a massive blood-red fraud flag right under my nose, and I had been too busy steering my financial battleship to look down. The media tore me apart like hungry wolves. Financial gurus, son bleeds, clients dry. Vance empire collapses in family fraud scandal. Although the criminal investigation cleared me, I was legally a victim, not a conspirator. The professional destruction was absolute and immediate. My license was revoked. The civil lawsuits devoured every cent I owned, and the silent question, "She didn't know? How could she not know?" became my new humiliating obituary. By the new year, I was 68, financially obliterated, and living in a cramped third-floor walk-up. The silence of that tiny apartment after the roar of the corporate world was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The copper kettle became my purgatory. It was the absolute antithesis of my former life. No mahogany, only sticky cracked vinyl booths. No panoramic views, only a street where pigeons fought over discarded fries. Gus, the owner, a man whose permanent expression was one of mild, existential exhaustion, didn't care about my past. He needed a body to serve coffee and flip eggs. "You ever waitress before, Eleanor?" he'd asked, wiping his enormous, flour-dusted hands on an apron. "I've been serving people for 30 years, Gus," I said. It was true. I was just serving them advice instead of hash browns. The job was physical, soul-crushing, and, oddly, honest. It was a brutal education in forced humility. I became numb, efficient, convinced I would die with a carafe of lukewarm coffee in my hand. Then Sterling Roth walked in. It was a cold, drizzly Thursday in March. He strode through the door and immediately violated the sacred code of the diner. "Thou shalt not announce thy superiority." He wore a charcoal suit that moved like liquid, and his voice, loud and clipped, immediately began tearing apart someone's life via speakerphone. I approached booth 7, forcing the waitress' smile, a fragile mask I'd perfected. "Sir, I'm going to need you to lower your voice or take your call outside. People are trying to enjoy their toast." He didn't look at me so much as he inventoried me. His pale blue eyes seemed to calculate the low thread count of my uniform. "I'll have coffee, black, and whatever passes for an eggs Florentine in this establishment," he said into his phone, never actually breaking eye contact with his call. "Hold on, minor inconvenience." I poured his coffee. While he argued about a hostile takeover, I couldn't help it. My eyes drifted. Old habits are like deep scars. You stop noticing them until something rubs against them. His table was a sprawl of expensive documents, financial statements, merger agreements, notes on a new luxury resort acquisition in the Caribbean. And there it was, right there, amongst the clutter, the ugly, undeniable truth. The classic, catastrophic, asset-backed security, ABS, leveraging trap. My brain, dormant for 2 years, snapped to life. It was like seeing a beautifully constructed machine with a single crucial, fatal flaw. His entire debt structure was predicated on the presumed future value of assets that, to my trained eye, were hopelessly overvalued and illiquid. It was a time bomb disguised as aggressive growth. 15 minutes later, he was still shouting about crushing competitors. Gus was sending daggers from behind the counter. I went back. This time the waitress' smile was gone. "Sir," I said. He sighed dramatically into the phone. "I really need you to hold on," he snapped, then looked at me as if I were a particularly slow ceiling fan. "Do you understand that this call is worth more than you will make in your entire, miserable lifetime?" The diner went silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. The humiliation was total, cold and absolute. But I realized he had just handed me the opportunity. The reason, the permission to drop the act. I looked down at the documents, specifically at the wildly optimistic projected capital expenditures for his resort deal. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, "I understand that you're about to lose everything you think you own." Sterling Roth froze. The arrogance dissolved, replaced by a mask of sheer naked astonishment. "Those leverage ratios aren't just dangerous," I continued, leaning in slightly. "They are fundamentally unsound. You've used a derivative structure to finance non-performing luxury assets. You are critically exposed to a single market correction, and your operating cash flow suggests a negative liquidity event within 6 months. You're over-leveraged and undersecured, Mr. Roth. I'd advise you to pull your head out of your phone and look at the ticking time bomb on your table." He was speechless. The silence felt heavy, thick, and delicious. "And what exactly qualifies you?" he finally managed, his voice dangerously low, the emphasis on the last word a calculated insult, to make such bold predictions about Roth Enterprises? I straightened my uniform, feeling the familiar steel spine I thought I had lost. Experience, I said simply. I've seen enough balance sheets to recognize the warning signs, even when they're disguised by an expensive suit. My name is Eleanor Vance. I was the senior partner at Vance Advisory Group for 3 decades before my son's crimes destroyed my firm. I've seen more financial disasters than you've had successful quarters, Mr. Roth, and yours has all the classic symptoms of an irreversible meltdown. He froze, utterly, completely frozen. The name, Eleanor Vance, was still mud in Chicago's financial circles, but it was expensive mud. It was the name of a person who understood fortunes 10 times the size of his current net worth. I'd need to see your full financials to be certain, I said, picking up the carafe and pouring myself a cup of Gus's terrible, honest coffee. But if you want a second opinion, a real professional opinion, I'll be here tomorrow, same time. Booth 7. He left without paying his bill. I knew, though, that I had drawn blood. At 5:58 a.m. the next morning, I was wiping down the counter. The knock came exactly on time. It wasn't tentative. It was a firm, desperate rap on the glass. Sterling Roth stood outside in the miserable Chicago drizzle. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair damp, and he was clutching a sodden manila folder against his chest. He looked utterly defeated. The confidence was gone, replaced by the naked fear of a man realizing his life's work was about to vanish. I let him in. He walked straight to booth 7 and slid into the vinyl seat. "Coffee?" I asked. He nodded, jaw tight. He spread the papers across the table, consolidated balance sheets, P&L statements, and a detailed summary report. "I spent the night going through everything," he said, his voice raw. "Had my team pull records, run stress tests, the whole drill." He met my eyes. "You were right, Ms. Vance. About the leverage. About the liquidity issue. My accountant gave me 4 months. Then the creditors start seizing assets." I sat down across from him, sipping my coffee. "How did you see it?" he asked, the question devoid of sarcasm, filled with genuine curiosity. "I have a team of 30-something MBAs, and none of them spotted what you did in 20 minutes of eavesdropping." "They get paid to tell you what you want to hear," I said, the words heavy with my own past experience. "I have nothing left to lose, Mr. Roth. I only deal in facts." He managed a grim smile. "Brutal honesty." "It's an expensive commodity, it turns out." He leaned forward. "I need your help, Eleanor. I need you to save Roth Enterprises." The request was staggering. 2 years of quiet despair vanished, replaced by a surge of professional adrenaline. I felt a flutter in my chest, a recognition of my own worth that nothing had been able to restore. "I'm a waitress," I reminded him, holding up my apron. "You are Eleanor Vance," he countered, his voice firm. "And despite the mess your son made, you were one of the best financial strategists in Chicago. My company wasn't destroyed by fraud, but by my own ego. Your company was destroyed by a conspirator." It was the first time in 2 years someone had made that distinction without being paid for it. It was the moment I stopped being Marcus's mother and started being Eleanor Vance again. I laid out my terms, slowly, precisely. The negotiation was exhilarating. First, legal compliance. We position this as Vance Strategic Consulting. Done. Second, complete access. No secrets. Every loan document, every offshore account, every contract. I see it all. Agreed. Third, authority. If I say we liquidate an asset, you execute it. If I say we fire your chief operating officer, you prepare the paperwork. You have to trust the pilot, even if she looks like she just got off an 8-hour shift." He took a deep breath. "Understood. You have my word." And finally, compensation. I named a figure for my monthly retainer that was exorbitant, enough to make his eyes widen. "Plus," I added, "if we turn this company around, if we achieve measurable, sustainable profit in 18 months, I take 2% equity in Roth Enterprises." Sterling Roth stared at me. He was drowning, and I was holding a life raft made of steel and high finance. 2% equity, he murmured. "That could be worth 10 million. "Then save the company," I said simply. "And we'll both be richer." He extended his hand. "Agreed, Ms. Vance. Welcome back to the game." The Roth Tower office was a cruel mirror of my past life. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished chrome, and a dizzying view of Lake Michigan. Sterling's assistant, Victor, handed me the comprehensive files with an air of professional disdain. 3 hours later, the initial shock wore off, replaced by the grim satisfaction of a surgeon who finally understood the depth of the cancer. Roth Enterprises was a masterpiece of financial negligence. The Miami-based Caribbean luxury resort deal was the tumor. It was a massive capital drain, financed by high-risk debt, sinking deeper into red tape every day. Roth had poured cash into it because it was flashy and ego-boosting, a monument to his own success. But amidst the destruction, I found the lifeblood, a cluster of quiet, unsexy, remarkably profitable investments. A specialized robotics firm focused on automated factory diagnostics, and a small-cap environmental tech company that developed water purification systems. These were the only things consistently generating positive cash flow. Roth hadn't paid attention to them because they didn't make headlines. When Sterling walked in, he looked tired, anxious, and thankfully ready to listen. "Worse than you thought, but salvageable," I stated plainly. "Your ego is what's killing you, Sterling. You chased the high-profile, glamorous deals while ignoring the solid, reliable earners. You built a magnificent showcase for a company with a rotten foundation. So, I am an idiot. You are a successful businessman who got high on his own supply," I corrected. "You started believing your press releases. The debt-to-equity ratio is alarmingly similar, however. My plan was brutal and surgical. Immediate liquidation. Sell the Caribbean disaster at a loss, but fast. Stop the bleed. Divestiture. Cut the dead weight, 3 underperforming subsidiaries, and redirect the capital to debt servicing. Double down. Triple the funding and expansion into the robotics and environmental tech sectors. They were the future. It meant admitting colossal public failure. It meant gutting projects he had boasted about in the Wall Street Journal. It meant swallowing pride so bitter it could choke a lesser man. Our success was quickly becoming undeniable. The quiet winners were booming. Debt was manageable. The stock was slowly ticking up. Our adversary, Jonathan Croft, the chairman of the Roth Enterprises board, grew frantic. Croft was a man whose smile never reached his eyes. He radiated cold, calculating power. During the first board meeting, where I presented the strategic divestiture plan, he attacked immediately. "This is madness, Roth," Croft declared. "You're proposing we abandon our most visible assets for factory robots? And you're taking this advice from an independent consultant who materialized from thin air?" I countered his every move with data, but as he left the room, he whispered to Sterling, "Bringing in outside consultants reeks of desperation, Sterling. The investors are already asking questions. How long until they demand new leadership?" I knew it wasn't just opposition, it was active sabotage. "He's running a classic crisis of confidence play," I told Sterling. "Undermine the CEO, create market chaos, watch the stock tank, then swoop in and buy up discounted shares. He's positioning himself for a hostile takeover." Late one evening, while I was searching the physical archive for an old debt document, Sterling joined me. Tucked into one of the worn folders, I found a faded photograph. A much younger Sterling, a beaming woman, and 2 small children. "My family," Sterling said quietly from the doorway. "Former family." I held up the photograph. "Divorce?" He shook his head, looking at the picture with eyes that still carried the weight of perpetual grief. "A drunk driver. Ran a red light on a Friday night, 15 years ago. My children were 8 and 10. The raw admission was a physical blow. The professional distance I had maintained snapped. Sarah, my wife, always said I was building an empire for a family that never saw me. After they were gone, work was all I had left. I focused on the biggest, loudest deals, the flashy ones. Maybe I was just trying to outrun the silence in my life. The recklessness, the ego, the need for unsustainable, high-profile growth. It made agonizing, tragic sense. His company wasn't just a business. It was a desperate, misguided attempt to fill the void. "And you," he said, turning the focus back to me. "You're here saving my life after what Marcus did. How do you find the strength?" "My son broke my trust," I admitted. "He destroyed my name, my business, everything I believed in. But the love of a mother, that is the hardest thing to kill, Sterling. It just sits there, like a lump of coal in your heart, waiting to be used for something else." We worked in silence after that, the air cleared of the purely transactional. We were 2 broken people, using the cold, objective language of finance to rebuild something meaningful out of wreckage. Despite our success, Croft was relentless. "He's called an emergency session for tomorrow afternoon," Sterling told me, agitated. "The resolution is a vote of no confidence to remove me as CEO." I reviewed the historical asset acquisitions, the ones Croft himself had pushed aggressively over the last 5 years. There it was, a chilling pattern. Every company Croft had championed, Roth acquired, struggled, and was then quietly restructured, with Croft's associated holding companies taking large equity stakes during the distress. He didn't just want Roth Ventures. He systematically dismantled companies for profit. The next morning, Victor, the assistant, burst in, pale. "Ms. Vance, the lobby, federal agents. They're asking for Eleanor Vance." My heart seized. Had Croft found some old angle on Marcus? I walked into Sterling's office with a dreadful calm. Through the glass, I saw 2 agents in dark suits. "Ms. Vance," the older man, Agent Davies, said, his face professionally neutral. "We need to discuss your involvement in an ongoing investigation into corporate espionage and financial fraud. Specifically, information provided by your son, Marcus Vance," Agent Reyes continued. My blood ran cold. "Marcus?" Agent Davies pulled out a tablet. "Marcus has been cooperating with us for 6 months. He's provided information about a conspiracy involving multiple financial firms, including your former company, Vance Advisory Group." "A conspiracy?" I whispered. "According to Marcus's statement, he was approached 3 years ago by a board member of a major corporation who specializes in acquiring distressed companies. The goal was to destabilize Vance Advisory. Marcus was given specific instructions on how to conduct the internal fraud, to make it look like a spectacular family failure. The ultimate goal was to acquire your firm's lucrative client list at discount prices." The room spun. My son hadn't just been a reckless thief. He had been a pawn. He was manipulated into destroying my company. Sterling Roth's face went white. "Are you saying Eleanor was targeted? That the fraud wasn't just Michael's mistake? The fraud was orchestrated to destroy Vance Advisory Group, and by extension, any company whose assets this party desired," Agent Reyes confirmed. Agent Davies placed a photograph on the desk. It was grainy, taken in a dimly lit bar. 2 men sat opposite each other, a younger, nervous Marcus and the smooth, unmistakable face of Jonathan Croft. That's Jonathan Croft, the chairman of the Roth Enterprises board. I looked up at the agents. "He's calling an emergency board meeting today to remove Sterling and take over the company." "We know," Agent Davies said. "He knows he's losing time. We need your help. We need you to attend the board meeting and wear this." He produced a small, discreet body wire. The emergency board meeting was the final act. Croft arrived with his small cabal, radiating the confidence of a man about to deliver a killing blow. The resolution was already on the table. Vote of no confidence and immediate removal of CEO Sterling Roth. The wire felt cold against my skin, but Agent Davies's voice in my earpiece was a steady anchor. Croft started his grand speech, talking about ongoing instability and the critical need for disciplined, ethical leadership. He carefully avoided my name, referring only to Roth's questionable independent counsel. "The numbers don't support your concerns, Jonathan," I said, standing slowly. The entire room went silent. Roth Enterprises has shown measurable, consistent improvement. Our debt has been restructured, and our growth sectors are outperforming. The instability, if any, originates here. I pointed to his empty chair. Croft's composure finally fractured. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "My name is Eleanor Vance," I repeated, my voice clear and carrying the weight of decades. I fixed him with a stare of pure, distilled loathing. "Former senior partner at Vance Advisory Group. You might remember the company. You orchestrated its destruction 3 years ago." The silence that followed was absolute. I nodded toward the door. "Agent Davies and Agent Reyes from the FBI might disagree that your background is unknown, Jonathan." As if summoned, the doors to the conference room opened, and 3 federal agents walked in. "Jonathan Croft," Agent Davies announced. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, corporate espionage, and racketeering." The recording had captured everything. Croft's desperate, panicked attempts to deny his years-long scheme to collapse companies and buy them for pennies. It was the end of his empire and finally the true end of mine. Sterling and I stood together by the window, watching the squad cars pull away. "So," Sterling said quietly. "What happens now, Eleanor?" "Now we rebuild," I said, looking out at the glittering skyline. "Your company, my reputation, everything they tried to destroy together? We fix what they broke." "Together," he agreed. 6 months later, Roth Enterprises, now Roth Ventures, was thriving under Sterling's refocused leadership. We had shed the ego projects and embraced the future. And Eleanor Vance, at 73, was no longer the waitress at the Copper Kettle. Vance Strategic Consulting was now a respected, sought-after turnaround firm. The insurance settlement from Croft's conviction helped restore the majority of my original client's losses, a small yet profound act of redemption for Marcus's mistakes. My son, having cooperated fully and facing far less time than originally expected, was now working a small, honest job in asset management under my supervision. A slow, painful path toward rebuilding trust. I still stop by the Copper Kettle sometimes, not for work but for a cup of Gus's terrible, honest coffee. I tell him the company is doing well. He just nods, wipes his hands on his apron, and says, "See? I told you you were a good server." I learned that success tastes sweetest when it comes after someone has done their very best to break you. It is never too late to fight back, never too late to start over, and never too late to use the broken pieces of your life to form the foundation of something stronger. And sometimes, the most important professional relationship of your life starts with a mutual, profound disrespect for a man who won't pay for his eggs Florentine. This is my story. It's long and it's messy and it's mine. I hope you found something in it that kept you attached until the very end. I hope you found something in it that proves age is just a number and a fighting spirit is everything. I'm Eleanor Vance and I'm 73 years old. And if you're still here, still listening to this old lady's tale, that's quite a compliment. I'm starting a new chapter of my life, consulting on ethics and recovery, and I want to share that journey. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you for listening.